Good morning and welcome. I'm Stephen Bader, Executive Director of the East Bay Economic Development Alliance, and we're very excited to have all of you here today for our 2021 Fall Membership Meeting. Without further ado, let me go ahead and have our Chair, Honorable Supervisor Keith Carson, go ahead and kick us off this morning. Thank you all.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Alameda County Supervisor Keith Carson, and I also have the privilege of serving as chair of the East Bay Economic Development Alliance, better known as East Bay EDA. I would like to welcome you to our 2021 Fall Membership Meeting. Today's event has been anticipated for some time now, as today East Bay EDA will be unveiling East Bay Forward, an economic roadmap for how our region will fulfill our vision to realize a more equitable, resilient, and sustainable economic future. As we begin, I do want to stop and say, I hope that you and your families and your loved ones and community are all well. We know that this has been a very difficult time in the last 18 months in particular, navigating through many of the impacts of COVID-19, and it's had an impact on all of our lives. The last 18 months have been, for many of us, very uncertain, can't figure out what to do, how to come through this process of reconnecting to life as we used to know it. And so as a result of it, East Bay Forward really kind of came about. And so we're pretty excited about it, and we hope and pray that everybody continues to stay well throughout this pandemic. We are glad that you were able to join East Bay EDA this morning to learn more about our organization and to learn more about the economic development in our region. As you can see on the slide, our mission is to strengthen the economy, build the workforce, and enhance the quality of life in our region. East Bay EDA has more than 150 members from business, government, special districts, environmental, education, research, labor, the philanthropic community, the nonprofit organizations, all making up this organization, all having leadership to help us to figure out how we move into the future. We provide customized research and business support services to our members, and we're frequently partnering with a number of co-partners in order to provide information. And we also have a number of these special events that we host every single year that are sponsored events. East Bay EDA has been known for our events, and our first virtual event on Zoom was our spring membership meeting, which was held on May 2020. Since that time, East Bay EDA has held more than a dozen virtual events, including our signature East Bay Innovation Award. And I hope that you've had an opportunity to attend it. It's almost like being at the Academy Awards for innovation here in the East Bay. We are going to have the event, which is going to be our signature event, coming up this October 14th again, and we hope that you will join us for the signature event that we hold each and every year, our Innovation Award, on October the 14th from 3:30 to 5 p.m. So please look forward to that and join us. It'll be a fun event, recognizing those who are very, very innovative and thought leaders in our community. East Bay EDA does a lot of work to generate original content and information for our members and stakeholders, including the information that we'll be releasing today with East Bay Forward. Indeed, today's event is a culmination of that work. The priorities and recommendations of East Bay Forward were carefully developed and refined over the course of several months. And I want to thank all of those who participated in our Strategic Advisory Committee, comprised of key regional leaders from the public, the private, and the nonprofit sector. Some of those are listed in front of you on the screen. East Bay Forward is more than just a regional economic analysis and report. We need to engage our networks to bring this work to life and support implementation of our identified priorities. As we begin today, we are fortunate to have the highly esteemed Dr. Manuel Pastor here to provide some broader context for today's event and some helpful food for thought here for us here in the East Bay on how we begin to move forward with our actions. Let us also thank our report sponsors whose names you see up on the screen. In addition to being a report sponsor, we have a longtime member of East Bay EDA who was a signature sponsor for this event, and that is none other than Bank of America. They also are sponsoring our fall membership meeting, and we want to say a big thank you to Bank of America for your continued commitment, not just to East Bay EDA, but to the Bay Area in general. And so without further ado, I'd like to turn over the meeting to Daniel Schelsman, who is the Senior Vice President and Market Manager of Commercial Banking for Bank of America, to continue with the morning's program and introduce our keynote speaker. Again, I want to say a big thank you to all of you, and thank you for being a part of today's event. And we look forward to continuing our connection.
Thank you, Supervisor Carson. Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Daniel Schulman, Senior Vice President and Commercial Banking Market Manager for Bank of America, and also a member of East Bay EDA's Executive Committee. I'd like to start by, thanking East Bay EDA for hosting this incredible event, and also to mention that it's a great honor for me to introduce our keynote speaker today, which I'll do here shortly. However, first I wanted to highlight the importance of partnering together with organizations like East Bay EDA at Bank of America, as we are prioritizing and addressing the underlying issues that people and communities of color face. The need for real progress on racial and economic inequality in the United States has been underlined by the impact of the coronavirus on communities of color, and a sense of true urgency has arisen across our nation in view of the racial injustices we've seen in the communities where we work and live. And frankly, we all need to do more. Taken together, the events of 2020 send a strong message to every organization and every individual, and that is step up. We all have a role to play in helping move communities forward, and understanding that forms the foundation of Bank of America's longstanding commitment to the people and communities it serves. And they are at the heart of the bank's $1.25 billion commitment over the next 5 years to advance racial equality and economic opportunity. This work will span across the company and includes philanthropy, community development, our hiring practices, and the development of financing solutions for small businesses, just to mention a few. And these efforts will focus on how to drive tangible progress along with our partners in making systemic changes and reforms that address economic and racial disparities. We have moved forward by directing approximately $300 million to 4 key areas across 91 US markets, including here in the East Bay, as well as globally. And those are, $25 million towards job initiatives in Black and Hispanic Latino communities to support job training and reskilling in order to create pathways to employment for Black and Latino students. Additionally, community outreach and initiatives, a $25 million commitment to underserved and minority communities adversely impacted by the global health and humanitarian crisis. Thirdly, direct equity investments to minority depository institutions with $50 million to facilitate benefits to the communities that they serve through lending, housing, neighborhood revitalization, and banking services. And then finally, proprietary equity funding to minority entrepreneurs, businesses, and funds. We've made a $200 million commitment to help supply capital for minority businesses looking to grow, and substantial investments in programs fostering future entrepreneurs. However, there is still certainly plenty of work to be done. And again, we all need to play a role. However, today we're excited for the unveiling of East Bay Forward, East Bay EDA's regional economic assessment and roadmap to best position the East Bay for a more equitable, resilient, and sustainable economic future. And on this topic, we could not, we could not have a more versed or apropos keynote speaker in Professor Manuel Pastor. Dr. Manuel Pastor is a distinguished professor of sociology and American studies and ethnicity at the University of Southern California. He currently directs the Equity Research Institute at USC And Dr. Pastor holds an economics PhD from the University of Massachusetts Amherst and is the inaugural holder of the Terpangian Chair in Civil Society and Social Change at USC. Dr. Pastor's research is generally focused on issues of the economic, environmental, and social conditions facing low-income urban communities and the social movements seeking to change those realities. And he's written a number of books related to his research. His latest book, State of Resistance: What California's Dizzying Descent and Remarkable Resurgence Means for America's Future, came out in 2018 and was lauded by the New York Times review, in a review by the New York Times as concise, clear, and convincing. In 2021 sees the publication of two new books, South Central Dreams, Finding Home and Building Community in South LA, as well as Solidarity Economics: Why Mutuality and Movements Matter. Dr. Pastor was the founding director of the Center for Justice, Tolerance, and Community at the University of California, Santa Cruz. He's received fellowships from the Danforth, Guggenheim, and Kellogg Foundations and grants from the Irvine Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Ford Foundation, and many others. Dr. Pastor speaks frequently on issues of demographic change, economic inequality, and community empowerment, and has contributed opinion pieces to such outlets as the Los Angeles Times, the San Jose Mercury News, and the San Francisco Chronicle, again, just to name a few. In January 2002, he was awarded a Civic Entrepreneur of the Year Award from the California Center for Regional Leadership. Dr. Pastor received the Liberty Hill Foundation's Wally Marks Changemaker of the Year Award for Social Justice Research Partnerships in 2012. And in 2017, he received the Champion for Equity Award from the Advancement Project for his work with community-based organizations fighting for social change. And finally, he recently shared with us that one of his biggest life accomplishments is, in fact, being happily married for 40 years. Without further ado, please welcome Professor Manuel Pastor. Professor.
Thank you for that very generous introduction. I did say that we've been married for 40 years. I added many of them happily, because you can learn from the hard times as well as the good times. And I think one of the important lessons of the last 18 months is that we actually need to learn from the hard times and not just from the good times. We need to figure out what are the lessons we're going to take away from this pandemic and what it has revealed about our schisms and inequalities and tensions as a society, and where do we actually head in the future to make sure that good times are ahead and that those good times are actually shared broadly across communities, across sectors in the East Bay and elsewhere. And I'm just delighted to be with you today to be able to talk about this. I've been asked to kind of frame the report, and I did something unusual, which is I actually read the report, so I know a little bit about what's in it. And I want to, like any good speaker, just make three big points. First big point, there's no going back to what we had before the pandemic. We need to change socially, economically, politically in order to have a more secure future. Second big point is that as we guide ourselves to that future, equity, mutuality, caring for other people, which has often been thought about as a sort of luxury, something we do after we grow the economy, is instead absolutely fundamental to creating a prosperity that will really last. And then the third big point is that if we really want to do what I just said, we're going to need to make sure that we bake equity in from the beginning rather than sprinkle it on at the end. We're going to need to make sure that equity is part of our fundamental economic strategy and not just something we bring in at the end to repair the distributional damage of, for example, pursuing high tech as your major driver. So let me make those 3 points. Many of you have been in a class before. You know now that the professor has made the big 3 points. You can doze off until I come to the stirring conclusion at the end, which will be in about 12 minutes. So on the first big point, one of the things I think about COVID is that COVID is the disease that revealed our illnesses as a society. They revealed the precarity of employment for so many people. The COVID revealed the racial wealth gap in which communities of color who on average have a net worth of about 1/10 of that of white families in the United States, and a sharper gap in places like the Bay Area, wind up having a situation where they don't have the kind of cushion to be able to stay home from work. It revealed who was really doing essential work that made sure that they had a lot of risk, COVID risk at work, and also lived in overcrowded housing at home. It made evident to us the homeless crisis that got exacerbated by COVID, but was existing before. It made clear something people were not paying a lot of attention to, the digital divide. Here in Los Angeles County, the numbers are not that much different for the Bay Area. When COVID hit, about 13% of white kids went home to a house that was on the wrong side of the digital divide, meaning that it didn't have high-speed internet and a computer or laptop. But about 45% of Latino kids, about 40% of Black kids were coming back to a home on the wrong side of the digital divide, and a year of lost learning has been some of the result. And COVID revealed the precarity of legal status for so many Californians who have been here for a long time, who are part of families that include US-born members, people with green cards, but who are themselves undocumented and couldn't get access to the kind of resources. So COVID revealed all of these illnesses as a society, these underlying fragilities. And these are the things that we need to address to be able to be stronger going forward. We do not want to recover to where we were before. We do not want to recover to a normal that did not work for so many. We need to reimagine and restructure going forward. COVID is also the disease that revealed part of our economic future. The emergence of remote work was an acceleration that happened during the pandemic that is something that is bound to last. The development of the logistics industry, which is going to be something that is going to be good for the East Bay in particular, but it's a place where the economy is definitely going to grow going forward in ways that we didn't think about. But it also means some declines and problems for those sectors of the economy that have relied on short storefronts. There's also another thing that's going on, which we're seeing in the labor shortages that are being experienced by so many businesses right now. A lot of the analysis of that has been dramatically incorrect. For example, so many governors in the red states said it was unemployment insurance. Let's cut out the supplemental unemployment insurance and people will go looking for jobs. And they did that, and there was no faster job growth in those red states than in blue states. Some are seeing it mostly as a question of wages, and do we need to raise wages to reattract workers? But one thing that's fundamentally gone on is that workers are looking to be treated better, with more respect, with more balance about their work-life balance, with more meaning in their work. And you're seeing a lot of people who simply don't want to go back to sectors that are not just low pay, but where they feel that there's tremendous harassment at work, there's not as much dignity at work, and that they really want to get more meaning out of their work. And this is a lasting change. You see this in the millennial workforce. You're seeing it in much of the rest. How are employers going to create conditions where workers feel respected so that they can feel attached to that work and want to be coming back? I think the last thing in this kind of no going back is that we've thought about how, COVID might have revealed placelessness, that with remote work, you can work anywhere. But that hasn't really occurred. The people who were in high tech, who moved away from the Bay Area, moved to Sacramento or the Sierras, and they actually might be coming back. They didn't actually move that many out of state. And a lot of the movement out of state is not lasting, because when you've got a Florida and a Texas, which are actively restricting rights, which are actively risking their own populations in the pursuit of a failed public health strategy. That's steering away businesses. And so place remains important, and that'll be very important to the East Bay, particularly because when you think about your job structure, I know that in the report, there's a measurement of location quotient, how many jobs you've got. A lot of your jobs are actually over in the Silicon Valley with the residents from those jobs living in the East Bay. And one of the issues is retaining those residents as well as retaining other communities that are there. So that's the first big point. Second big point is that lifting up the questions, particularly ones I mentioned at the beginning about the inequalities revealed by COVID, are not something that is a sort of add-on. It's actually quite fundamental. And it's fundamental to rekindling and sustaining economic growth. We've done research in a book that's called Equity, Growth, and Community, looking at the ability to sustain job growth in 200 metropolitan areas in the United States. And one of the things that we found out was that the biggest deterrents to being able to sustain job growth, there are some that you would think. Having an educated workforce is important. Local anchor institutions like universities and hospitals are important. Having a diversified industrial structure is important. But the most important factor is the current level of income inequality, as well as the level of residential segregation and metropolitan fragmentation. Inequality actually dampens the ability to sustain job growth over time. Now, you might be thinking that maybe this is just the musings of a professor from Southern California. And I know you Bay Area people, you look at those of us from Los Angeles and say, I'm not sure we believe anything they have to say. I know this because, yes, I've been married for 40 years, but to a woman who was born in the Mission District and grew up in Napa, and like many Northern Californians, feel like marrying a Southern Californian was actually an act of charity. But listen, that not just to this Los Angeles person, but to institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the Federal Reserve, not known for their left-wing leanings, that have looked at the relationship between able to sustain GDP and income inequality and social fragmentation. And they too find that when you're leaving people behind and keeping people behind, you wind up not being able to sustain employment and GDP growth at a national level either. Equity is central to economic growth. It's actually not an afterthought. And you realize this when you begin to understand that when you've got an educational system that functions for everyone, you're getting a more productive workforce. When you stop over incarcerating, you stop wasting skills that could actually be channeled into business entrepreneurship, productive workforce, et cetera. When you stop leaving undocumented people in the shadows, you wind up being able to create the kind of employment and entrepreneurship opportunities that can move things forward in a region. And one of the things I think that's really important then when you think about this is this. When you think about an economic strategy for a region, and I think that the East Bay Forward folks are thinking about it in a more complex fashion, but I want to push on one thing, is that we tend to think about the economic drivers of a region, the export industries like information and other sorts of things which attract dollars from outside of a region. We think about the local serving industry and manufacturing, very important in the East Bay. We tend to think about local serving industries, and we tend to have a notion of how do we drive the top and how do we grow the middle of the workforce. That's important, but you also need to think about lifting the bottom. If you get into the details of the East Bay Forward report, one of the things that you're going to find is, yes, you had pretty good job growth in your high wage jobs. About 300,000 new jobs are projected to occur between 2018 and 2028 going forward. That's healthcare, that's high tech, that's finance, a number of other things. But you're anticipating a growth of 650,000 low wage jobs. Now, you might think, well, is there something wrong with the economic strategy? Maybe not, because behind every software engineer is an army of nannies and gardeners and food service workers. And behind high tech, high wage service is often low wage service, but it's actually part of the modern economy. And there's nothing antithetical between supporting aggressive increases in the minimum wage, supporting the development of low-income housing, supporting rent stabilization, and also trying to promote high-tech, high-end manufacturing in clean tech and all of the drivers of the economy as well. And we need to stop thinking that there's a schism between doing these two things. We need to really be able to bring them together. The final point I'll make in the few minutes that I have left, because speakers who respect the time limits are often invited back again, and speakers who exceed the time limits are often talked about afterwards if there was a parking lot for you to walk in, and grumble about me, is that point about baking equity in. And I want to make a few points about this as we close. One is it's important to recognize that equity comes to the table kicking and screaming because it often hasn't been heard in the past. Keith Carson, you're a supervisor right now, but I remember you as an activist too, sort of knocking down doors about issues of inequality that needed to be addressed. That's the way those issues get to the table, and that's the way a person like you gets to the Board of Supervisors, is by raising those issues. And when we speak about collaboration, we often think about people coming together and agreeing on things, and we hope that happens. But if you're coming together with people you already agree with, that's just getting together with your friends. That's not collaboration. Collaboration is principled conflict. It's figuring out who you have conflicts with and coming up with the principles you agree on to try to resolve them, and coming up with principles about how to conflict, how to have tensions that are productive, that involve respect for each other, and that can arrive at solutions. So equity, it's a hard issue, particularly when we talk about racial equity, and it's also something that's going to come into the conversation with tension, with protest, with social movements. It is key to bake it in to your forward planning. So when you start thinking about clean tech, it's really great to see the STEM programs for students of color and low-income communities being talked about in this report to create a workforce for the future, to build it into the planning. How do we make these service sector jobs I was talking about decent paying jobs so people can raise a family, still continue to live in the East Bay because they're essential? And how do we build in the metrics of accountability, which are, for example, in the Bay Area Equity Atlas, which you call on, which is a creation of PolicyLink and my own USC Equity Research Institute? And how do you blend the metrics of accountability around equity with the metrics of economic growth? Final thing I'll say is that it is key to begin to lift up these issues and talk about these issues on a regular basis, particularly the question of racial equity. You know, a lot of us find talking about racism, racial equity uncomfortable and wind up avoiding it. But what I try to tell people is that it's a little bit like going to the gym. If you go to the gym like every 6 months, when you go, you're going to hurt yourself. Your muscles are going to be strained. You'll drop weights on your feet. You'll be looking like a fool, so no one's actually going to try to help you when you make a mistake with the weights. But if you go on a regular basis, your muscles will get stronger. You will make less mistakes. People will come by and tell you how to do things the right way. They will accept you and call you into a conversation. If we talk about racial equity and center it in our economic planning and our accountability mechanisms every day, we're going to get better at it. We're going to develop the muscles. If we talk about things in ways that maybe offend our friends, will correct us and bring us into the conversation and make things better. I am so optimistic about what the East Bay can do and lead on, and I'm optimistic because of this excellent report that we're just about to hear. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Well, if you're not already inspired, I don't know what to say. We will be hearing a little more from Dr. Pastor in just a moment. And as we do that, we're going to transition now, and I'm going to be bringing up, we're going to have Derek Braun, who's Senior Associate of Strategic Economics, unveil our East Bay Forward analysis. And so we'll, without further ado, I know Derek's working on bringing that up now, and we will continue with this morning's presentation. And following Derek, we will have our panel discussion that will ensue from there.
Okay, thank you very much. Hopefully you can all see my screen, see a PowerPoint slide. So as Stephen mentioned, I'm Derek Braun, Strategic Economics. We've been working with East Bay EDA over the past 6 or 7 months to develop East Bay Forward. We are also a Berkeley-based firm, so this is our background. And I do want to recognize members of our team, including Dina Belzer and Sam Moskal, who also worked on this project. Today, I'm going to give about a half-hour presentation introducing East Bay Forward. So I'm just going to open with a little background on the project, talk about some of the findings regarding the pandemic's impacts on the East Bay, opportunities identified for the post-pandemic future, and then also roll out the 12 priorities for economic recovery and prosperity. Okay, so a little background on this effort. I know you heard a little bit of this from Supervisor Carson, so I'll go quickly. But essentially, East Bay Forward was launched with the intention of ensuring that, of identifying and determining how to leverage East Bay's opportunities within the Bay Area economy in a way that really share benefits across the East Bay subregions. And also as an effort to reduce disparities in income and race that Dr. Pastor was speaking about, and to protect against future economic shocks through emergency preparedness, safeguarding public health. And ultimately, this project is about facilitating coordination amongst our very deep existing regional networks and systems to shape our business climate, land use and infrastructure, education and workforce development, and community health and well-being efforts. This process did have a lot of participants, and I just wanted to acknowledge and thank everyone who was engaged with the development of East Bay Forward, including our 28-member Strategic Advisory Committee, all the people who participated in our focus groups, our interviews with local topic area experts, the East Bay Executive Committee, and stakeholder groups. So that all informed the analysis and the priorities that you're going to see, as well as the extensive data analysis that we conducted. Finally, there were 6 guiding principles that informed the development of East Bay Forward. And really these principles, they don't mean a whole lot unless they continue to guide the implementation of the priorities in East Bay Forward. But just to walk through them quickly, one of the principles is ensuring, recognizing that our challenges are connected and interrelated. So we need to ensure coordinated advocacy actions and investments. Secondly, guiding principle was ensuring equity as part of this effort, ensuring the results were measurable, providing meaningful indicators and outcomes, particularly around equity issues. Working towards a regenerative economy, a circular economy in which that is clean and renewable, but also allows for just transition and shared benefits within the local economy. Providing resiliency, preparing for complex disasters, whether they're pandemics or natural disasters. And also ensuring transformational change, ensuring that future investments really create systematic change that addresses our region's challenges. Okay, so I'm going to move into a discussion of East Bay Forward's key findings. There's a lot more detail in the report. I'm just going to hit a few high points here. And I just want to open with a little snapshot of East Bay's economy and workforce, and then also the impacts of COVID-19, the COVID-19 pandemic. So just to give that snapshot of the East Bay economy heading into the pandemic, we had, the East Bay had about 1/3 of the Bay Area's jobs, about 36% of the Bay Area's residents. This is the center of a major concentration of the region's workforce. We also found that a high share of East Bay residents also work in the East Bay, higher than most other parts of the Bay Area. So it does serve as sort of a self-contained economic area as well, with of course links to the region. Population growth slightly outpaced the Bay Area. Employment growth was comparable to the Bay Area as a whole. And we know that a lot of the East Bay has a significant share of the region's industrial land. In fact, it has about half the warehouse and manufacturing space inventory in the Bay Area. So this really reflects the importance of the goods movement and manufacturing sectors, but also the East Bay is home to a great deal of innovation-focused activities, including advanced manufacturing, life sciences research, biotech, clean tech, and agricultural technology innovations. As far as the East Bay's workforce, the East Bay does have a very diverse workforce. The chart on the right shows the breakdown of educational attainment per population above age 25. And this workforce really feeds into the fact that the East Bay has such a diverse economy, including a lot of manufacturing jobs that require workers at a variety of skill levels and a variety of specialized training as well. But going into the pandemic, we already know there were extreme racial and ethnic disparities within the East Bay workforce and the East Bay residents, largely on the lines of educational attainment, wage levels even at the same levels of educational attainment, as well as access to resources, housing insecurity and affordability challenges, which also leads to commutes and quality of life impacts for residents as well. And then the East Bay is not immune to the bifurcation that's happening within jobs and occupational openings in terms of them being concentrated in high skill jobs requiring extremely high levels of education, such as a bachelor's degree or above, and a lot of openings in lower wage jobs that are less stable or don't provide benefits. And we analyzed growth in middle wage jobs, and as with other regions, we saw how those are the relatively limited opportunities, those middle wage, middle skill job opportunities. So then looking at the impacts of the pandemic itself, we can kind of break it into two categories. One is those trends that existed before the pandemic, but were really amplified and accelerated by the pandemic. This includes those systemic economic and health disparities I mentioned. It also includes the rapid growth of e-commerce, which is leading to decreases in demand for retail space, increases in demand for industrial space, lower changes in storefront tenanting from soft and hard goods retailers to more experience-focused restaurants, bars, and entertainment and gyms. And also we saw that during the pandemic, there were very different outcomes for large and small businesses when it came to e-commerce, with small businesses less able to make this pivot to e-commerce and much more vulnerable. The pandemic accelerated those housing affordability challenges. It really laid bare once again how lower income residents are much more vulnerable to income loss and potentially housing loss and homelessness. And we also saw how small businesses really continue to face challenges in accessing funding and financing resources, which in turn also affected their ability to access public assistance during the pandemic, such as those Paycheck Protection Program forgivable loans. And the research has found that businesses owned by women, by Black, Indigenous people of color, and immigrant business owners were most had the greatest challenges in accessing these resources and funding. Then we have our set of transformative impacts, how the pandemic has really changed things likely permanently. One is the expansion of remote work, which is playing out in impacts and potentially reducing demand for office space per employee, reshifting where there's demand for daytime goods and services, and also impacting our transportation patterns and where people live. There's the widespread adoption of distance learning, telehealth, and all other digital strategies, such as online entertainment for existing venues. We saw the enhanced regulatory flexibility with state and local government. Well, the easy example, of course, is things like open streets and also expedited permit processing, loosening of alcohol restrictions. But in many ways, government responded very quickly and flexibly, and hopefully some of that stays with us. And then also there were lasting impacts in terms of new funding and resources deployed by local, state, and federal government, especially through the American Rescue Plan, potentially through the upcoming infrastructure bill. So depending on how those resources are used, they could have transformational impacts in East Bay. So let's look ahead briefly to the post-pandemic future. These are basically bright spots that will support the East Bay's future growth and prosperity, including legacy assets. I'll describe in a moment. We'll take a look at venture capital investments and some considerations for 5 major industries to watch in the East Bay. I'll start with legacy assets. So this is always a good starting point to understand the sort of fixed in place assets that really contribute to any place's competitive advantages. These are the assets that aren't going anywhere, at least not anytime soon, and that have really underpinned the growth of the East Bay for decades, if not a century or longer in some cases. And this really includes colleges and universities like UC Berkeley, Cal State East Bay, and all the community colleges, and the national laboratories. These all contribute to the East Bay's educated workforce. It attracts talent to the region, and also the research from these organizations and institutions gets spun off into startup business activity as well. We also have BART in the Capital Corridor, integrating us within the Bay Area and the mega region of Sacramento. Port of Oakland and Port of Richmond are critical for supporting our goods movement and manufacturing industries, as well as the highway routes, which also serve commutes too. We have a very large supply of industrial land I mentioned earlier, which accommodates diverse manufacturing, goods movement, and innovation-focused activities, as well as quality of life assets. Not just quality of life assets, they also, these assets that bring in, that really represent the East Bay's cultures, that really contribute to inclusivity and a sense of belonging, and also bring economic activity to the East Bay. These include parks, open space, and the tremendous diversity of arts and cultural representation in the East Bay. Let's take a look at venture capital investments. It's sort of a barometer of some emerging industries and startups. So East Bay firms in 2020 were awarded over $5 billion in venture capital, which is a 5-fold increase since 2016. The East Bay, as a share of the Bay Area, has a fairly small share of venture capital investment, but it's still among, compared to states, higher than almost every state in the United States. And one interesting thing that we saw in the data is East Bay venture capital investments are much more diverse than those in San Francisco and Santa Clara counties. So on the right, you can see the categories of these investments. Computer technology is no surprise for any place in the Bay Area, but the East Bay also has investments in biomedical, clean tech, and food innovation that really stand out. This map, and you can take a longer look at it in the report, it's a lot to absorb, but this map shows the categories of venture capital investment in different sub areas of the East Bay. You can see Southern Alameda County and Northern Alameda County, where Berkeley and Emeryville are, really attract the greatest amounts of venture capital investment. Southern Alameda County focused on computer technology, but a lot of diversity is found in these investments in Northern Alameda, Central, really throughout most of the East Bay's various sub areas. So I mentioned those industries to watch. These are industries that are positioned for growth based on a lot of the East Bay's local assets and broader trends, and in many cases offer very diverse job opportunities. The first one is manufacturing, which is really a linchpin of the East Bay economy. And it grew, jobs in this sector grew 22% from 2014 to 2019 versus just 13% across the Bay Area as a whole. And there's a diverse set of activities in here. You can see this middle column shows whether or not the jobs are concentrated in the East Bay versus the Bay Area for each subsector within manufacturing. And the right column shows whether or not those jobs grew more quickly in the East Bay than the East Bay overall, than job growth in the East Bay overall. So there's a lot of subsectors that are growing rapidly, that are very concentrated. Transportation equipment manufacturing in particular, a lot of that's driven by Tesla, but we also have food manufacturing, machinery manufacturing, a lot of high-tech manufacturing in here as well. This is very integrated with the Bay Area's innovation economy in terms of advanced manufacturing, and the East Bay's role as scale-up production space for a lot of the innovation-oriented industries found in the Bay Area. Some new opportunities may exist from reshoring that's being talked about more and more as a result of understanding from the pandemic that we need more domestic manufacturing capacity. And manufacturing does also contribute a fairly high amount of middle wage entry-level jobs. We did hear as part of this project that some of the smaller and mid-sized manufacturing businesses in the East Bay might require support for reinvestments and efficiency improvements, that they might struggle to make some of the pivot to advanced manufacturing. Next up is creative technology and design, which includes the Bay Area's computer technology sector, but also research and development, architecture and engineering, media and technical consulting. Now, these jobs are not, in many cases, not especially concentrated in the East Bay compared to the Bay Area, just because there are such heavy concentrations of these jobs elsewhere in San Francisco and Silicon Valley. but they are a very large amount of the East Bay's overall employment. And in many of these subsectors, they've really been growing pretty rapidly, as you can see in this rightmost column. In the East Bay, these jobs are supported by the diverse talent pool, the national labs in UC Berkeley. So this is a real bright spot going forward. The Bay Area's sort of central strengths within creative technology design are not going anywhere soon. Next one is biomedical industries, which really ties into the Bay Area's role as a global hub of biotech and biomedical innovation. There's been a lot of venture capital investment in biotech, especially over the past year and a half with the pandemic. And really the interesting thing about the East Bay for biotech, you can see here these jobs are a lot. The East Bay has actually its own sort of ecosystem within biomedical industries, including smaller startup activity focused in Emeryville and Berkeley, Northern Alameda County, as well as to some extent in Contra Costa and Tri Valley, but also a lot of production space that's available in Southern Alameda County. Clean tech jobs are another bright spot with a wide variety of innovations. These jobs offer a lot of high quality middle skill, middle wage jobs and are positioned for growth and really serve these is well positioned for these given its manufacturing and construction strengths. And finally, goods movement logistics, another bread and butter industry for the East Bay that's focused here because of the Port of Oakland and all those assets I mentioned previously. These jobs do offer very diverse opportunities. Okay, I'm going to move into the 12 priorities for economic recovery now. So basically, these priorities create a framework for coordinating all these BDA stakeholders' efforts, everyone in the room. They've been designed to respond to those principles and the major opportunities and challenges identified through the East Bay Forward work. But we all need to recognize that the implementation of these priorities really needs to happen through collective and individual action. And so East Bay EDA will pursue the implementation of these priorities in 4 focus areas: land use and infrastructure, education, workforce development, business climate, and community health and well-being, which really came to the fore as a result of the outreach conducted for East Bay Forward. The first priority is to prioritize delivering resources and services for East Bay small to mid-sized businesses, especially those that were most severely impacted by the pandemic. So this is about small, mid-sized businesses. It's about coordinating and creating new resources with really a focus on those businesses harmed the most or most vulnerable, including those owned by Black, Indigenous, and people of color, immigrant-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, and those businesses and industries that suffered the greatest losses. So this is about new access to capital, new banking resources, changing public procurement opportunities. And in the report, we have a variety of potential implementation examples for each of these priorities. The second priority is to promote assets and opportunities in the East Bay region to attract and retain a diverse range of businesses and quality of jobs. This is more of a sort of collective marketing focused priority with East Bay EDA in particular well positioned to spearhead a lot of these efforts in order to share information about all the great things that are happening in East Bay and leverage events like the Innovation Awards. There are very few organizations that have sort of a 2-county, Alameda and Contra Costa County focus like East Bay EDA does. The third priority is to concentrate education, workforce training, and broadband infrastructure investments that expand equitable access to economic opportunity. So the broadband for this speaks to Dr. Pastor's mention about the digital divide issue. It's about addressing geographic gaps in data service and high subscription costs and a need for greater digital fluency. This is also about really aligning our workforce development education systems to create systemic changes that avoid the issue of workers falling through the cracks as our stakeholders with this process have told us happens as they move from education into technical training and then into apprenticeships or in on-the-job training, sometimes not making the leap from one stage to another. Implementation examples include paid apprenticeship opportunities while also receiving technical training, business incubator programs, etc. Fourth, we have aligning land use policy and infrastructure investments to ensure sufficient flexibility to respond to regional trends around remote work, e-commerce, and related innovations. So this is all about tackling those land use impacts from e-commerce and remote work. This is about ensuring that land use policies and regulations support the evolving needs of our commercial properties over time as demand changes for retail and office space and distribution space. But at the same time, an eye needs to be kept on making sure that any public investments and any policy changes really benefit all communities. So this could include work around sharing best practices, focusing efforts on creating complete communities that support job growth, and also keeping in mind the potential need to transform underperforming malls. The fifth priority is to mobilize the East Bay's robust network of institutions and organizations to address regional housing affordability needs. There is a lot of work happening around this already. A lot of organizations and institutions focused on the tremendous affordable housing need and housing affordability challenges in the East Bay. This is really about organizing and amplifying that work and looking to share solutions, to advocate for funding, and adopt shared policies and an advocacy platform. And one thing to keep in mind is that the housing affordability challenge isn't just about the cost of housing, but also resident job quality and income levels as well. So supporting high quality jobs for residents, access to those jobs, better pay and benefits, they play a factor in resolving the affordable housing crisis as well. Sixth, we have protecting and investing in the East Bay's industrial employment lands to support economic diversity. This really recognizes, as I've said several times in this presentation, the industrial lands in the East Bay are a very unique asset. And they're very critical to a lot of different activities, including goods movement, logistics, manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, even research and development and scaling up of businesses. There are efforts around this that can be leveraged, like the priority production areas identification process that's being done by the Association of Bay Area Governments and Metropolitan Transportation Commission. So potentially that could be leveraged to identify and preserve industrial lands. There's also a need to protect a lot of industrial lands which are vulnerable to sea level rise and earthquake resiliency challenges. So planning for those challenges plays a role. And then potentially connecting East Bay manufacturers and distributors with markets is another potential implementation example. Seventh, we have securing regional and local multimodal transportation infrastructure investments to support job growth and accessibility. And basically, there's potentially a lot of infrastructure funding coming down the line, and now's the time to get ahead of that to figure out collectively what transportation improvements are needed that will support job growth, and not just in the usual locations, but support job growth equitably across the different sub areas of the East Bay. And we also know there are some really big projects in the planning right now, like Link 21, potentially creating a new Trans-Bay crossing, and the BART extension to Silicon Valley. It's just some examples. We also know that there's a lot of new needs in terms of electric vehicle charging infrastructure, bicycle and pedestrian improvements, and transit improvements. So this is a chance to identify how best to deploy that funding. The eighth priority is to position the East Bay as a leader in sustainability and climate advancements while spurring economic growth and innovation. So as I mentioned, clean tech's already a major industry in the East Bay. This is about enhancing and expanding that network of businesses, technology, and resources, supporting those sustainability investments that are going to be so important as we continue working towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions, decarbonization of our economy. And really, this is a great opportunity to prioritize manufacturing and construction workforce investments as well. The ninth priority is to bolster the East Bay's diversity of arts, culture, parks, and other essential assets to ensure a vibrant and cohesive region. So as part of this, there's a need to really ensure coordination between organizations to identify and advocate for shared concerns and funding needs, as well as ensure equitable park access, since not all communities have the same amounts of access, same amounts of parks or public transportation connections to parks as well. The 10th priority is to expand access to health resources, human infrastructure investments, and other supports that enhance the resilience of our region's most vulnerable residents and workers. Obviously, during the pandemic, we saw the very disproportionate impacts of who suffered from COVID-19, who was hospitalized because of COVID-19 and passed away because of COVID-19. And there were a lot of disparities in that. So this is about collaborating around new investments in education, workforce, childcare, and health resources, really investing in our human infrastructure in the East Bay. So there are also new possibilities here to pursue adoption of policies that support livable wages and benefits that will protect workers, especially the most vulnerable workers. The 11th priority is about developing solutions to improve public safety outcomes in the East Bay while reducing the systemic biases and encounters between community residents and law enforcement agencies. We heard this one loud and clear from the East Bay EDA Executive Committee and other participants in the stakeholder outreach. And there are a lot of new opportunities here to coordinate and share best practices and advocate for resources and examine policies that could be pursued among all the different communities. And it's also noteworthy that really public safety isn't just a reactionary process. It should be a process that involves the investments in infrastructure that set the groundwork for long-term community safety as well. And then finally, priority number 12 is to champion efforts to develop integrated socioeconomic data sets and metrics to evaluate equity outcomes over time. So this is about developing a shared understanding of the existing data sources and then identifying those new sources that would help East Bay communities to really understand outcomes, especially in terms of equity. And this comes up all the time, for example, in understanding ownership of businesses and very limited data available on the race, ethnicity, and gender of business owners in a given individual community. So this is an opportunity to work towards expanding data collection and forming new partnerships around this data collection. So I just want to close by saying thank you very much, everyone, for your time and attention. I do want to make sure I leave plenty of time for the panelists, and as Dr. Pastor said, I want to get invited back. So I'm going to wrap up on time, but I encourage everyone to please read the full report, and I also am looking forward to a great discussion.
Thank you so much, Derek. That was a great overview of what's been a months-long project with so many different partners and stakeholders, and we're really excited to have some of them about to come up and offer some of their reflections and reactions to things we've heard both from Dr. Pastor and what Derek's had to share. So we'll be bringing up now a number of folks, including Kristen Spanos is going to be moderating our panels, first 5 Alameda County. And you can see the names of the other folks up here. As you know, we're very tight for time. We don't have a lot of time for audience questions. So I'm just going to go ahead, and as we transition from this screen, you'll start to see everybody's images pop up on the screen and might disappear. So we're excited to have all the folks here: Timothy from Stop Waste, Rajani from Bayer, Councilmember Terry Topham from the City of Berkeley, and Dr. Pastor to also join. So Kristen, I will let you take it from here. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephen, and congratulations to you and your team and the partners on the East Bay Forward report. I am Kristen Spanos. I'm the CEO for Alameda County First 5. And for those who may not be familiar, we're a governmental entity that's focused on young children and families in the workforce and the public systems that support them. As part of our portfolio of work, we conduct a biannual kindergarten readiness study. And I have to say, as I read the report, I'm also a nerd, that I was struck by how the recommendations in the East Bay Forward report and Dr. Pastor's comments align with our findings and recommendations from First 5 studies and what supports communities and families so that children can thrive and really serves our collective future as a region. We consistently find that community and family socioeconomics are directly correlated with kindergarten and school readiness, which then The readiness correlates with third grade literacy and numeracy and high school graduation and lifelong earnings in health and well-being. So recommendations like equitable access to economic opportunity, particularly crucial given what we know and the moment that we're all living in. So I'll be moderating the panel. We have limited time. Stephen has done some of the introductions of the panelists, if they could introduce themselves again and state their name and title and organization as they respond to the questions. And Ms. Hammond, I'm gonna start with you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
What things struck you the most about Dr. Pastor's comments and the highlights of the East Bay Forward Report as you think about the work of your organization?
Yes, so Sarojini Hammond, I have the pleasure of leading our HR organization at Berkeley. For those of you that may not, and Bear, for those of you that may not be familiar, we sit on 46 acres in West Berkeley. What I loved about the professor's comments, first of all, I'm going to have my husband go back and listen to this and see how we get to 40 years of marriage, because he had some gems in there that I picked up. Just a couple of comments that I really appreciated. The first is not going back. So when I think about our path out of the pandemic has been science, our path will continue to be science, which is why Bear Fund has invested over $250,000 to strengthen our quality of STEM education in Berkeley, with a special focus on low-income students to get access to fun, hands-on science opportunities. The second thing that really struck me is equity and caring for others. I really connect with that because as we think about developing talent, recreate pathways in our neighborhoods in West Berkeley to enter biotech fields, and partnerships with biotech partners helps to prepare low-income families for this. In fact, each summer at Bayer, we provide paid internship opportunities for students to learn the ways of for highly competitive industries such as ours. And then the third piece where he says we have to bake it in. I love that comment. You know, as we think about our development agreement with the city of Berkeley, if it's approved, we hope to expand our workforce by roughly 1,000 jobs in the coming decade. That's the type of work that I think the professor was talking about, and it really spoke to me in terms of no going back, really caring for all, and then bake it into the process. Don't sprinkle it on top. I love those comments, so thank you.
I appreciate that. I do as well. I think that they particularly resonate at this time. And Mr. Burrows, I'm wondering if you would like to add and share what struck you.
Absolutely, thank you. I'm Timothy Burrows. I'm the Executive Director of Stop Waste. It's an absolute honor to be on the panel here with my fellow panelists. So thank you for having me. And I also just want to say I'm so continuously impressed with East Bay EDA, their leadership on this work, and really pleased to partner with them and so many other businesses and nonprofits and institutions to launch this report today. So for those of you that may not know Stop Waste, we're a public agency dedicated to helping Alameda County residents and businesses and schools and local governments prevent waste, increase energy and water efficiency, and transition energy use in buildings away from fossil fuels to clean electricity. So we award grant funding, we provide technical assistance, we implement regulations, and we tend to focus on policies and programs that have multiple benefits. We like to advance work that does more than one good thing at once. And that's one of the things that excites me about East Bay Forward's blueprint that EDA led the development of. The priorities in this report, they're not born out of silos. They are multi-benefit in nature. They do more than one good thing at once. So for example, public transit and multimodal infrastructure, that's not only an economic imperative, that's an equity and environmental and public health imperative as well. It's a quadruple win at least. It might be a quintuple win or whatever comes after quintuple. I don't know, but it's a policy that does a lot of good things at once. And similarly, when you use all the tools at our disposal to attract and retain and support businesses in the East Bay that are at the forefront of reuse and repair and recycling, or businesses that provide services and technology to make our homes more energy efficient or water efficient, or help us transition from gas water heaters in our homes to electric ones. When we attract and retain businesses that do this work, it's good for our local economy and job creation, but it also is consistent with our sustainability goals and our equity goals and our public health goals. So those types of investments create a lot of benefits. Again, they do more than one good thing. And the last point I'll make is when you design policies and programs that are multi-benefit in nature, this is one of the things that Dr. Pastor emphasized, you work across sectors and discipline. It requires a lot of collaboration to design and implement policies that are multi-benefit and nature. So the other thing I like about East Bay Forward is it emphasizes that multi-sector public-private partnerships and collaboration. And it's really a call for all of us to work together and achieve a sustainable economy. And so Stop Waste looks forward to being a part of that.
Great. Thank you so much for highlighting the cross-sector really requirements of the work that we're talking about from an economic perspective. So Councilmember Taplin, as an elected official after hearing from business and nonprofit partners, I'm interested in hearing what particularly feels pressing for you.
Thank you. What really stands out to me is the need to lead innovation with equity and inclusion, particularly in questions around land use policy. I have the privilege of representing the neighborhood and the district that I grew up in. I'm in West Berkeley with Bayer, and they've been an amazing partner. And I definitely look forward to, continuing our 30-year marriage, so to speak. Berkeley is known for being an innovator, both, on policy and technology, but we're also, we also have immense socioeconomic and health disparities. Growing up, I saw my community struggle with economic despair and community violence, high rates of asthma, infrastructural disinvestment. And so when I'm trying to make the best decisions, I try to think about my role and the role of council's control over land use. How can we leverage our land use authority to match innovation to community need? And how can we keep our land uses up to date and nimble enough to retain talent, retain innovation? We've seen with the pandemic how life sciences have weathered fairly well. We've seen the importance of biomanufacturing, especially local biomanufacturing, in meeting the global health crisis. And West Berkeley is kind of, one of the anchoring, the whole I-80 corridor is like an anchoring in the East Bay's economic ecosystem, especially in industrial land use and manufacturing. And we have a lot of pride in that, but one of our challenges in Berkeley is, people remember the 90s, and to them, they want to keep everything the way it was. But if we do that, we do risk losing not only our innovation, our talent, but also our diversity, because kids, the kids I grew up with who went into some fields are working in Boston, they're working in New York, and their grandparents are still here. And it's really important for us, especially in our affordable housing work, to be able to keep families together, keep families in their neighborhoods. And we can't do that without having an integrated lens and perspective into land use and economic development and modal shift as well. San Pablo Avenue is undergoing a big process. I'm a former transportation commissioner, and Bayer is expanding, and some of our other life science operators are also expanding. So we do have to think about all these things together. And as a largely ceremonial bureaucrat, one of the best things I can do is let people do their jobs and get out of their way. So I definitely invite everyone here, everyone in the network, to reach out to my office, let me know how we in District 2 or we on council can facilitate the work being done. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Before I move into the second question, the one support I'd like to lift up, because it seems so fundamental to workforce, and it's been so impacted by the pandemic, is childcare and really the support that's needed. Because oftentimes we think about it as a family support or just from a child, but it's also, the workforce angle of it, that, workers need access to quality, affordable childcare to support their ability to work. So Dr. Pastor, what additional specific advice and/or considerations might you have for local partners to ensure the types of innovations needed to achieve the outcomes you spoke of will be employed in ensuring that we don't go back to business as usual?
Well, thank you for that question. And I hadn't realized that my marriage advice would be so useful to so many. I'm taking my wife out to dinner tonight, so I will explain to her that it was useful. One of the things I would say is I think that East Bay is well positioned to be concrete. I'm really glad to listen to the councilman talk about really the sort of specific things that can happen, to listen to Sarah and Jenny about the actual STEM programs that can steer people into these positions. A couple of things I think would be useful to pay attention to. You rightfully raised, Kristen, the question of childcare, but there's also the question of elder care. The one thing that we know about demographic change in California is that when most people think about it, they think about the state becoming browner, more people of color. That process is actually dramatically slowed down. And what is really going on is that the state is getting older. We were about 11% people above the age of 65 in 2010. It's going to be about 27% in 2060. And actually, where that population is getting older is not what most people think looking at the past. When you look at the past, you think, oh, it's an older white population and the younger population are folks of color. What that leaves out is an amazing fact, which is that Black people, Latinos, and Asians actually also get older. And that's what's going on in the state. And if this current level of inequality, I mean, basically, if you look at the median age projections for whites, going to get a little bit older over the next 20 years, but not much. For particularly Latinos and Asians and African Americans, the age profile is going up. And if you take the current level of inequality and the lack of assets that people have, you're talking about very problematic retirement conditions. Why is this important? Because the sandwich generation is not just worried about taking care of their kids, they're also stretched with taking care of their elders. And it's a thing that we're going to have to get a big handle around, and it's going to affect the East Bay as much as it affects every other place in California. The other thing that I would raise that I think Berkeley has been a real leader on is disability rights and disability inclusion. And that is something where I'm so glad, Councilmember Taplin, that you raised this. When we think of innovation, we often think of inventing an iPhone. But innovation is also, what can we do around land use and zoning? How do we create STEM programs that work for kids of color in low-income communities? How do we create elder care community centers so that folks can stay in their homes but have a place to go to? How do we innovate on the social policy side? And how do we innovate in the Bay Area around including people with disabilities in workforce development programs and in workforce participation? And those innovations will be something that the rest of the country is looking to.
Sorry about that, I was muted. I really appreciate those comments, particularly around the demographics and when you think about the wealth disparities and the impacts, right, and the disproportionality, particularly within in the economic context. So I'm just wondering, in terms of, I'm watching the time, and want to toss it out there to members of the panel. We've heard a lot of great ideas. How do you think that the East Bay EDA should move forward with these priorities? Do you have specific advice that you would give Stephen and his team and partners?
Well, I'm happy to jump in. I'd also be happy to defer to Councilmember Taplin or Sarojini. Should I jump in? Okay.
Yeah, jump in.
Okay, sounds good. So I think as a number of us said, and Dr. Pastor started off by saying, you know, the business as usual economy is not at all appealing, right? This economy that we're used to of taking resources, making stuff, and then wasting it. An economy that doesn't do enough to advance equitable solutions, sustainable solutions, that is very susceptible to disruption, as we've seen over the past couple of years. That's really, I don't think anybody wants to kind of go back to that. So some of the themes in terms of how we move forward, I like the theme that we've been talking around collaboration and connections. There's so much opportunity in the East Bay and so many organizations and individuals doing such good work. So part of the solution, I think, is setting the table, creating a space for people to connect with one another and share ideas and best practices. I'll give you an example. Stop Waste hosts a network of food recovery organizations in the East Bay, like the Alameda County Community Food Bank and other amazing organizations that are recovering edible food and distributing it to people in need. Again, that's the type of work that has multiple benefits. You're taking food that might otherwise go to waste, creating an environmental issue and an economic waste, and getting it in the hands of people that need it, that experience food insecurity, which has been exacerbated over the past couple of years. And so that network that those organizations connect through is really important for them to be able to share ideas, grapple with similar challenges, lift up best practices. So part of the solution moving forward is networking. We host a similar network around businesses that do reuse and repair and recycling. And we leverage our grants and technical assistance to support those types of businesses. So connecting people moving forward and then supporting the types of businesses that we want the next economy to look like through the many resources that many organizations in the East Bay have has to be part of the solution moving forward.
Great, perfect.
If I can just build on that just a little bit. So I actually think I completely agree with everything that was said. I think the East Bay EDA is really uniquely positioned to pull together leaders from collective action to really move this forward, because as we know, this topic is complex and very deeply rooted and will require solutions from multiple stakeholders. As an employer, I think we need to step up and help with educational issues. From a government standpoint, they really need to play a role in creating a climate where creativity really can thrive. And then of course, nonprofits, the creativity and agility to quickly respond to the changing needs, I think will be key as we continue to move forward.
Councilmember Taplin, as an elected official, curious for your remarks.
Yeah, I really agree with Sarojini was saying. I think for us at City Hall, sometimes we get, a little detached from how things actually work for stakeholders on the ground. So, getting in our ears, keeping us informed, letting us know when we're moving in a bad direction or we have ideas that don't make sense. And, I think that especially around, how do we create environments and climates that are conducive to creativity and innovation. I'm a strong believer in making policy based on the actual needs of stakeholders rather than trying to, advance things from the 5th floor on down. So, I definitely welcome, constant contact. Anyone here, my email address is ttaplin@cityofberkeley.info. Feel free to email me anytime. I'm happy to meet up. And I do think, pressure is always good. And hold us accountable. Don't let us say one thing in one meeting and another thing and another meeting and another thing in public. And don't be afraid to come out and speak and hold our feet to the fire.
I appreciate that. Dr. Pastor, before I turn us to closing, is there any parting words you'd like to share with the East Bay?
Yeah, I think the thing that I would lift up is about this issue of connection and collaboration that, Timothy, you were really moving toward. And I think one thing that's very important about that is to recognize that not every table that we're going to be a part of is going to be as diverse as we would like it to be. And how do you speak for the people who are not there? This is a group mostly focused on economic development. And so I have tried to raise a lot of issues of equity, fairness, and inclusion and how they fit in. When I'm with nonprofits, I discuss why it is that fairness shouldn't just be kind of a plea for redistribution, but how do you look for the sweet spots that are going to generate prosperity and growth at the same time? So if I'm in a group of people who are immigrant rights activists, I often am the person who's lifting up the question about the centrality of anti-Black racism in setting the kind of contours for the othering and distancing and xenophobia that's affected so many immigrants. So if you're in a space where there aren't visibly disabled people, I actually have a voice condition, a disability, Do you raise the questions of disability? Do you speak for the people who are not there so that the connections which might not be made through active collaborations, because we don't get a chance to talk to each other at every moment. But when business people in business circles say, we must combat racism, we must try to figure out how to move forward on affordable housing, we must bake equity into the way that we practice our public policy recommendations and also our businesses, because many businesses know that the fairer they are, the more people feel included, the harder they work, and the more successful the business is. How do we take those messages to our own sectors and challenge our own sectors, and not just at these tables where the sectors are meeting? That, I think, is the real challenge around connection that I think Timothy's comments, Sarah and Jenny's work, and Terry's leadership point to.
Fantastic. Thank you for summing it all up and for really highlighting the humanity and the social construct of which really economic development is. So much appreciation to all of the panelists and also to the great work of EDA. I am grateful that we have a visionary leader and Supervisor Carson as the chair of the EDA, and really to help guide us with the implementation of the support's recommendations. And I'm so thankful to have worked with him over the years. So I'm going to turn it over, and I'm wishing everyone a great day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I first want to thank the panel for your thoughtful discussion that you initiated this morning, and Kirsten, especially for your moderating this panel, and to a longtime person that I've always admired and respected, Dr. Manuel Pastor, for the opening remarks. I mean, really kind of energized me at a time when things are just like heavy weights on your shoulders. So I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate your longstanding engagement in the area of equity and inclusion way before they became the words that we're using today. I want to say a big thank you. East Bay Forward is not, again, just a regional economic analysis report. It's going to be one of those things that we bring to life by engaging in what we heard earlier when Dr. Pastor said that we should be having these conversations and engagement on a regular basis, not just periodic or once or twice a year. But in order for us to be able to move this, the findings of this report and to engage the community around the report, it is our intent to take it to the Mayors Associations, the City Managers Association, other welcoming groups, the private sector, for engagement around how we as a community go forward, how we engage everyone in the opportunity to participate in this community that we all live in going forward, and how we integrate the issues that come to us that might make us a little uncomfortable, but are very important to have those ongoing discussions. So please look forward to that. Reach out to us if you have organized groups that we should be approaching to participate and bring this to. As I said, I want to thank all of the people who Zoomed in today that have played a part to this, especially those of you who invested the last 4 or 5 months to help us to get to this point in terms of the East Bay Forward report that we have now before us, that we're going to start circulating out and engaging the community in. For individuals who want to follow this even further, since we are in both Contra Costa and Alameda County, you'll be able to go back to our partners in Contra Costa County on the Contra Costa County Television CTV. They'll be rebroadcasting this event, and the dates and the times will be shown on your screen. And for us here in Alameda County, you can go to East Bay EDA's YouTube channel for sharing and viewing the discussion that happened today, the panel discussion, and this incredible, energizing, kind of spirit-led, thoughtful process that Dr. Manuel Pastor laid on us, and also the challenge that he gave to all of us to do a lot more coming through and out of this pandemic. It should look like a whole different world that everybody feels like they have a plate at the table and really feel that they can contribute and be a valuable part of the community. So make sure that you download the East Bay Forward report, and also make sure that you join us for our next event, our signature event, which is the 2021 East Bay Innovations Award, which will be taking place on Thursday, October the 14th from 3:30 to 5. Again, to all the members of East Bay EDA, the executive members, the officers, the board of directors, and the supporting groups to East Bay EDA, and especially our staff and Stephen, I just want to say thank you for all the hard work that you continue to do on so many different issues that confront and then before our community. It's good that we have such a diverse membership that brings that kind of discussion to the table every time we get together, because we are a community, even as diverse as we are, business and community and civic, philanthropic, educational, nonprofit, community-based organizations, all of the community at this table to help East Bay EDA be what it's been for the last 30 years, which is a thought leader in the Bay Area, but one that welcomes everybody to the table. So with that, I want to say again, thank you. Make sure that you download, read the report, help us in getting that conversation going so that we can try to find the common ground and move forward on some of the suggestions that come out. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Appreciate everybody.